Cerebral palsy is a condition which can affect physical and mental functions. As of 2001, there were an estimated 764,000 people who had been diagnosed with cerebral palsy in the United States. Furthermore, around 8,000 infants and between 1,200 and 1,500 young children are being diagnosed with cerebral palsy annually. It's important for people who might work with someone who has cerebral palsy to understand the condition so that they can most effectively work with them. Cerebral palsy can occur as a result of a brain injury while the brain is developing and up to the first 2 years of life. Up to 80% of cases of cerebral palsy develop during pregnancy and oftentimes occur due to unknown causes. During the first few years, brain damage as a result of bacterial infection or physical collisions also are a significant contributor to the development of cerebral palsy. The disease is typically diagnosed after noticing either slow motor development, abnormal muscle tone, or unusual posture. Additionally, if infantile reflexes are present for longer than they should be, that may also be a warning sign of cerebral palsy. Cerebral palsy isn't a condition which is cured. Instead, treatment focuses on increasing functionality, movement abilities, maintaining long-term health, cognitive development, and independence. Treatment is most effective when it is begun at an early age. Treatment may include physical and/or behavioral therapy, medication, surgery, and the use of external aids. Modern treatments of cerebral palsy are constantly being evaluated, and new methods for improving treatments are being developed and tested for their effectiveness. One study published in 2013 looked at 131 different treatments. The authors concluded that casting ankles for increasing range of motion and weight-bearing activities, therapies aimed at improving self-care, functioning, aerobic fitness training, and anti-seizure medication were all intervention strategies which had evidence to support their usefulness. It is recommended that similar therapies be utilized in future treatment of cerebral palsy. Research has been carried out to determine what current levels of activity for children with cerebral palsy looks like. One study found, not surprisingly, that children with cerebral palsy are less likely to be active than children who do not have a disability. Furthermore, levels of physical activity for individuals with cerebral palsy were directly related to their level of gross motor functioning. So, the more a child's movement abilities are impacted by cerebral palsy, the more likely they are to be physically inactive. Children with cerebral palsy are also more likely to engage in physical activity that is less vigorous. As previously stated, it's vital that treatment for cerebral palsy continues to evolve. I already mentioned that physical activity is one way to help treat cerebral palsy, and another author recommends that any professionals working with children who have cerebral palsy should shift their focus away from traditional or packaged treatments. Instead, more intensive physical activity programs are a great way to increase physical and mental health for individuals who have cerebral palsy. Even weight training may be of benefit. There is also evidence to support that such activity can assist with neural recovery in individuals who have experienced damage to their nervous system. With this in mind, it's important to develop physical activity programs which allow children with cerebral palsy to participate so that they can hopefully make healthy lifestyle changes regarding physical fitness. Physical activity programs should be developed so that they are inclusive for students who have disabilities. Students with cerebral palsy will benefit from joining other students in physical education classes psychologically by improving their self-esteem, allowing them to participate in activities they enjoy, and giving them a general sense of freedom. Socially, by allowing them to participate in group activities, further their social skills in a social environment, and develop relationships with their classmates. And physically, by improving their mobility. In order to ensure that programs are inclusive, it's important to have a deliberate plan to combat potential barriers. Personal barriers which should be addressed prior to participation include lacking of confidence or motivation, previous negative experiences, or lack of support from peers. These may be tackled by showing the students the practical benefits of physical activity. That is, it has previously been demonstrated that children who participate in physical education classes improve their physical fitness and mobility gradually over time. If the children have previous negative experiences with physical activity, program administrators should give concrete information about how similar issues will be avoided moving forward. Lastly, peers of students with cerebral palsy should be made aware of the importance of inclusion in physical activity in order to stress to them they need to be supportive. Next, environmental barriers also need to be taken into consideration. The most relevant environmental factors include equipment and facilities. Adaptations need to be made to activities to ensure that all students can participate, or, if this is impossible, then it may be appropriate to select a different activity. Environmental barriers must be taken into consideration on a case-by-case basis when working with students with cerebral palsy. Teachers need to be willing to get a little creative when making modifications. For example, one student with cerebral palsy was unable to participate in hockey and PE class because he only had the use of one arm and utilized a wheelchair. So he couldn't hold the hockey stick in one hand and move at the same time. The teacher of this particular student's class modified the hockey stick so that it could be held in between his knees, which allowed the student to participate in the game. Another example was a student with cerebral palsy who participated in a track and field unit. The student was supposed to work on throwing discus. However, the discus chosen for the class was too heavy for her to effectively throw. In this case, it may be necessary to purchase lighter equipment. In addition to environmental barriers, there's also certain organizational barriers. These barriers include ensuring that there is adequate support staff for physical education programs, that programs are safely set up, that class sizes are appropriate, and that enough funding is budgeted to allow for inclusive physical education. Administrators need to take all of this into consideration when developing physical education programs. The reality is there is a finite amount of resources, but all administrators should do the best that they can to allocate sufficient resources, financial or staffing, to physical activity programs. And lastly, it's also worth taking into consideration what students with cerebral palsy have had to say about physical activity programs in the past. One study, which included students with cerebral palsy, set out to find what elements of a physical activity program were of particular importance to students. The study found 3 areas in particular which were present during bad days. On those days, students reported that they felt socially isolated from their peers. They also felt like their competence was questioned in regard to the activity which they participated in. And finally, bad days also included days in which their participation in class activities were limited for one reason or another. In contrast, the students also talked about what defined a good day. Those days were the days in which the kids reported feeling a sense of belonging within the class, felt that they were able to participate in the activities in a skillful and meaningful way, and were able to recognize the benefits of physical activity. When all of this is taken into consideration, it becomes apparent that individuals in charge of physical activity programs must stress the importance of providing adequate programming decision so that individuals with cerebral palsy or other disabilities can be included. The psychological, social, and physical benefits make it worth taking the time to address personal, environmental, and organizational barriers.